From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, and Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. Donald Trump roils Washington with those three nominees for his cabinet. Who are they? Why did he choose them? And what are their chances of being confirmed in the next Senate that will have 53 Republican votes? Welcome, I'm Paul Gigot, here with our daily Potomac Watch podcast for Wall Street Journal Opinion. And I'm here with Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson. Donald Trump is filling out his government in rapid fashion, and to say he's upsetting the status quo is understating it by a long way. Let's start with Matt Gaetz, the Florida congressman, four-term Florida congressman, as Attorney General. Listen to him talk at the Conservative Political Action Conference about the FBI and law enforcement that he could be running as Attorney General.
Seems like every time I turn around, they're engaged in surveillance or list building or monitoring, and I don't care if it takes every second of our time and every ounce of our energy. We either get this government back on our side or we defund and get rid of, abolish the FBI, CDC, ATF, DOJ, every last one of them if they do not come to heel.
Well, there you have it, Kim. Why do you think Donald Trump chose Matt Gaetz?
Well, I do agree with Matt Gaetz in one broad way that there are major problems at the Department of Justice. And I would argue that one of the greatest tasks out there right now in D.C. is getting somebody into that top position that is going to depoliticize that agency and restore some of its credibility, which is why I find this pick to be so incredibly troubling and problematic. I'd say it's the worst pick Donald Trump has made so far. And let me just explain why that is. Matt Gaetz has, and you could see the applause there, has made himself into a bit of an online hero among many in the MAGA base. But his colleagues do not share that view. And by the way, I'm not talking here about moderates who, for instance, are still steamed about Matt Gaetz's role in getting rid of Kevin McCarthy. He was obviously central to that. And by the way, it helped propel his fame. But rather that they look and they see someone who is a self-promoter, who doesn't really do a lot in Congress, who's more interested in self-promotion and sort of getting that attention, doesn't put in the work, and they don't particularly like that. He also has a tendency to throw other people under the bus if he thinks that it will help him in his career. So that's one issue, is that if you're going to choose someone controversial to go head the Department of Justice, choose someone that begins with a natural base of support in the Senate, which he does not necessarily do. But two, this guy is dragging a trunk full of ethics scandals, which I don't have any doubt are going to get a lot of attention in coming days. And it's going to give people fuel to rally against him.
Okay, so those, you've mentioned a couple of the things that are troubling about the Gaetz pick, but the question remains, why did Trump pick him? And I mean, there are two schools of thought, I guess, on that. One is he wants to show loyalty to Gaetz. He by doing this, he allowed Matt Gaetz to resign from Capitol Hill, which he did on Wednesday. 2 days ahead of was expected to be an House Ethics Committee hearing at which a report on his alleged behavior with underage girls would be examined. Gaetz, by the way, claims he did nothing wrong, but that was supposed to come out. Now he's out of Congress, so that puts the kibosh on that ethics report. But the idea is, okay, Trump nominates him for AG. He gets out of the House, avoids the ethics report. And then if he goes down in confirmation, then, okay, well, he stood by his man and he gets credit for that. But the alternative view is Donald Trump, Kyle, is deadly serious about getting Gaetz confirmed, because he really is serious about getting control by a loyalist of justice and the FBI and using it as Donald Trump would like to see it used. And if you combine that with the Gabbard appointment and the Pete Hegseth appointment, seems to me he's going after three of the agencies that he thinks helped to undermine his first term.
You can tell a three-dimensional chess story where this nomination by Gaetz is intended to take some of the fire away from Trump's other nominees, including Pete Hegseth, and maybe Trump knows that there are Senate concerns about getting him confirmed. But I think that is not the likeliest scenario. I'm with you that this looks to me like Trump wanting to install loyalists into these positions. And remember, one of the things that Trump has said he thinks he did wrong in his first term is that he picked people for these jobs who were too independent. He didn't like the way that Jeff Sessions ended. He didn't like the way Bill Barr ended. And by the way, Bill Barr's great crime at the end of the first Trump administration was coming out and saying publicly that he did not see any outcome determinative fraud in the 2020 election. He also told that repeatedly to the president, and that is what got Bill Barr excommunicated. And Bill Barr was right about that. We've had now 4 years of hashing over the 2020 election, and despite the theories you can hear from Trump on Truth Social, there still is no evidence of outcome determinative fraud in that election. But Trump's takeaway, Trump's lesson from that seems to be that I need to pick people who don't have independent power bases. I need to pick people who are Trump MAGA loyalists first and install them in these jobs to get what I want.
Kim, the resignation of Gaetz clearly looks to be an attempt to front run, to get ahead of this ethics committee report, which we don't know the contents of it, but it must not be great.
Yeah. And I would just note to really back up that point, Paul, he has no reason to resign right now. OK, I mean, that we're actually moving into a lame duck session. His vote is kind of necessary in the House where there isn't much of a margin. Other people that Donald Trump has tapped to have top positions, like Elise Stefanik from the House or Mike Waltz, they're not stepping down because, again, there's no need to at the moment, which really backs up the point that it seems the only reason he would do this is to attempt to forestall this ethics report. I think we need to see what's in it. And look, I think this ethics report is important for another reason, too, is that, he was also investigated by the Department of Justice. And given the politicization of the Department of Justice, he made the case, that he was targeted. And I could see a lot of Republicans wondering if there was an element of truth to that, just because the DOJ has so undermined its own reputation. But what's going on in the House is an investigation by his peers, by fellow Republicans, as well as Democrats who sit on that committee. And if this report is bad, it's because his own peers have found out information about him.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about Tulsi Gabbard's nomination to be Director of National Intelligence when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with my colleagues Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson here on our Potomac Watch podcast. The reaction to him, Kyle, and the nomination has been, I think it's fair to say, negative. I'm talking about Republicans and conservatives, many conservatives, not the Democrats who are naturally going to oppose him. Real doubts expressed by several Republicans. We don't know how his nomination would go. And I want to talk a little bit later about the potential confirmation of Gaetz. But let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard here for a second. She's been nominated by the president for the Director of National Intelligence. That's the agency inside the White House that coordinates the findings and views of the 18 intelligence agencies throughout the government. Hard to believe we got 18 intelligence agencies, but we do. And presents the coordinated findings to the president and to policymakers. So things like how much of a threat are North Korean ICBM missiles? How close is Iran to making nuclear weapon? How is China aiding Russia in its war with Ukraine? That sort of thing. And they do it with high, medium, or low confidence. And they interpret all of this, diverse findings, and often diverse and clashing views. And then they present a final judgment to the president and policymakers. So it's an important post. And what you decide can very much influence what a president decides to do in response to, say, the Iran nuclear threat. Now, Gabbard's views on foreign policy, I think it's safe to say, would be in the left wing of the Democratic Party if she were still a Democrat. She used to be, and then she has left the party. Listen to what she had to say about Donald Trump's Middle East policy in his first term.
President Trump's criticism of Congresswoman Omar is complete hypocrisy. Trump says we will never forget 9/11. Yet it is Trump who has been acting as al-Qaeda's big brother and protector in Syria, and who's turned our country into the prostitute of al-Qaeda's biggest supporter, the Saudis, who've been spending billions of dollars spreading their exclusivist radical interpretation of Islam around the world. The very same ideology that's been inspiring al-Qaeda and ISIS and other terrorists to carry out their barbaric acts.
Prostitute of Saudi Arabia, protector of al-Qaeda. That is not warm and cuddly rhetoric. And we could find 25 of those without too much trouble on this or that, China, Russia, what have you, Ukraine. So my question to you is, why did Donald Trump pick her if loyalty is the byword?
I think Trump has been convinced that she has turned toward him in recent years. I mean, she's a former Democratic member of Congress, but she has gone and campaigned for him lately. I don't have 25 more examples, but I have a couple more that are worth citing. In 2022, this is Tulsi Gabbard talking about Ukraine. This war and suffering could have been easily avoided if Biden admin NATO had acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine's becoming a member of NATO, basically blaming Western NATO expansion for Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. Here's another one. This is from 2020 when Trump was still in office here. Just came from the intelligence briefing. The administration came and brought to Congress. This is regarding the killing of the Iranian commander Soleimani. They provided vague comments, no justification whatsoever for this illegal and unconstitutional act of war that President Trump took. I mean, I'm a little bit baffled by his desire to have someone who looks upon what he sees as the successes of his first term in that way, or at least she did at the time. I think senators ought to have some questions about having someone who thinks that way in this kind of role. On the other hand, it's more comforting that Trump is saying that he wants to name John Ratcliffe as the director of the CIA. That is a choice that is more in the mainstream. And maybe his view is that that's a serious choice to lead a serious agency. And the director of national intelligence job is more to serve him as the president.
Yeah, well, I mean, DNI, as that post is named, delivers the daily intelligence briefing to the president. So has that one-on-one contact with the president. Kim, I think his appointment of, as I said, Gabbard, combined with Gaetz, combined with Hegseth, suggests to me this is an attempt to control and maybe purge much of the intelligence services that Trump thinks ganged up on him in the first term, and sometimes did, particularly the 51 former intelligence agents who came out and said the Hunter Biden laptop was phony.
They did. And obviously, I mean, it goes beyond that. Remember, there was a big question about the role the intelligence community played during the whole Russia collusion hoax, too, in terms of some of the excuses they were giving to suggest that Donald Trump really was favored by Vladimir Putin and had somehow, engaged in the election. There's a lot of animosity there. He remains very frustrated, as Kyle said, that the Department of Justice didn't buy into his election fraud claims. He's very unhappy that there are a number of generals during his time who pushed back against him, and then after his time in office have said unflattering things about him. So there's no question these departments, the Department of Justice, the Pentagon, and the intelligence community, he seems to be, he has this issue with. And look, I'm all for putting reformers, capable, good people in those positions. But for a president who just spent this entire past year on the election trail bemoaning some of the bad behavior that happened there, putting people in that are just going to be yes men who aren't really going to accomplish reform, or who might even use the levers of power to engage in their own politicking, I think is very dangerous.